Have you gotten your copy of the issue yet?
No. Maybe I have. I haven't gone downstairs yet.
I didn't want to ruin the surprise either, but you know, it's a really beautiful cover.
Oh no! Oh. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's like,
Oh, that is lovely.
I'm so happy that it's on the cover. I can't even tell you. It's like,
oh, thank you so much, David. That is so, you know, I used to write for Artforum in the dark days when nobody knew who I was even, you know, and
I've read all of your pieces for Artforum. Are you kidding? Of course.
Thank you. But I'm going to tell you that, like, that feels like I've come some kind of full circle. That makes me feel, between the day I entered just above Midtown as Mademoiselle Bouche-Noir and today, that's a full circle for me. I'm really truly on a new adventure now.
So I'm David Velasco, the editor of Artforum magazine. I'm talking today with Lorraine O'Grady, whose Retrospective Both And opens this month at the Brooklyn Museum in New York. It's organized by Catherine Morris and Aruna D'Souza with Janae Daria Strand. I love that you had other careers before you became an artist, which is, you know, which to me is very heartening. I think to many people it's heartening to know that you can find yourself as an artist, you know, after all sorts of events, all sorts of jobs, careers. Yeah. And I want to know if you can tell us a little bit about how you became an artist, how that happened.
The first thing is, when I was trying to think about, like, where do I start? You know, I have to really start at the beginning. I did enter the art world in my early 40s. I did Mademoiselle Bouche-Noir with the official entry when I was about 45. But I'd actually sort of been on my way from a really early age to get there, but getting sidetracked constantly. I mean, I should say that I was always good at writing. I exempted out of freshman English, you know, all of that, you know. And I had trained in social sciences, so it seemed my mother had wanted me to go to law school, but I wasn't going to be able to do that. So I had gone to work for the government. And I wasn't there for too long before I realized that these were not the people that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, you know. Because the work environment, as we all know, becomes a home environment pretty quickly. And for me, the question was, who do I want to live with? Who do I want to spend time talking to? What do I want to spend time talking about? And so on. I left the government after exactly 5 years, took out my retirement fund and went to Europe and started the process of doing something that I felt I needed to do, which was to explain myself to the world, because no matter where I went, nobody understood who I was. I was usually the only Black person, almost always, believe it or not, the only female. So all of these things left me opaque to the outside world, and I felt that I needed to change that somehow. So I left the translation business. I left the husband at the time, and
I like that. That's the afterthought.
I'm sorry. And then I came to New York, and when I came to New York, I was sort of the old lady or the chick of a guy in the rock business. He was head of publicity for Columbia Records. So I decided I had to earn my keep in that world. I didn't want to just be somebody's old lady. So I started writing rock criticism. That's what happened. And I had the big debut. I was on the front page of the Village Voice with a 3,000-word article about the Allman Brothers Band. This is all I slipped over the transom. I figured I asked somebody, how do I get something I write to the editor? And they actually told me which door to go into, which elevator to take, which way to turn after I got over the elevator, exactly where her office was, and where to slip it under the door. As it happened, a friend who had been my groomsman, a groomsman in my wedding in Iowa City, where I was at the workshop, he'd taken an MFA in poetry, and he was a friend of my husband's who was in film at that time. And one day he called me. His name was Jack, and Jack called, he said, Lorraine, he said, you've got to do this for me. because he was alone in New York and I was alone in New York, and we become good friends. We were not lovers or anything, but we had been supporters of each other. He said, "You've got to do this for me." And I said, What do you mean?" He said, "I can't handle anything. I can't handle anything." He said, "Can you take this course for me?" And and I said, "What course?" And it was the foundation course in English, if you can believe it. So I took that, and that started me. That was about 1974, when I had sort of figured out that I couldn't stay in the rock world without really belonging there and all of the rest of that. And now I was going into another world, and I don't do anything by half measures. So I decided I've got to find out what this world is about. So I went down to the A Street bookstore when it was still on A Street, and I went to the bookshelves with the art books. And I mean, like everybody else, I'd always read coffee table art books, but I had never actually read an art book from cover to cover, right?
Uh-huh.
And I couldn't find anything that really appealed to me. And as I was leaving, right by the cash register, there was a strange book, and it had print all over the front of it. It was language on the front cover, but it was an art book, and it was called the 1967 to 73 Dematerialization of the Art Object.
Wow. Oh, that's a great one. Holy shit.
I said, okay, this is something you can do. I had ideas like that all the time, but I didn't know they were art. As coincidentally, the School of Visual Arts was sort of winding its career down as the sort of home base of the conceptual artists. They all had taught there or gone to school there or whatever. And one day I found out that Vito Acconci was teaching a class upstairs for me, just at my hour. And I said, oh, so that day I kind of told my class, okay, here's something you can do while I'm gone. So I left them alone, and I went upstairs, and I sat in the back while Vito Acconci sort of guest taught this class. And when I finished, I said, okay, if he can do it, I can do it. So that was sort of the start of my commitment to thinking about becoming an artist, right? But it took another 4 or 5 years before it actually happened. And in 1977, I had this sort of like breast cancer scare that turned out to be negative. But I had taken these 2 Andre Breton books that was starting to teach surrealism at that point, and I'd taken these 2 Andre Breton books to the hospital. And one of them was Naja, and the other one was Surrealist Manifestos. And Surrealist Manifestos has a section of newspaper poems, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I came after it turned out to be negative. I was so grateful, and I also had a big crush on my very handsome doctor. So I was reading the newspaper, and I saw this headline that just grabbed me. It said, "The doctor is operating again." And I said, that would be a great start of a poem for my doctor to say thank you. And so I sat down, and I just started clipping and whatever. And I knew that I wanted to make a poem that would make sense for the doctor and for me. So it had anything to do with the randomness of the surrealists to start, from its very beginnings. But when I get through with it, David, it was the most amazing thing. I said, this is pretty good. This is too good to give to him. So I did. So I didn't give him the original collage. I gave him a Xerox copy. And then 2 weeks later, I had all of these very elaborate plans about how I was going to proceed with these poems, right? Because I already knew what they might be able to do for me. They might be able to bring language back to me in a way that it had been taken away before. And so I did a poem a week for 6 months. So when I finally opened these 30 years later, I opened them for Nick Mouse when he was doing the show Nick Mouse came by for a studio visit to see Miscegenated Family Album. He said, he said, just before I came to see you, I was at the home of the sister of Charles Henry Ford, and she gave me this for the show. And he took out this thing, and it was a Dada cutout poem. And I said, if you like this, I have something I can show you. It took me a week to find it. I was sure they were there somewhere, right? That box was there somewhere. And I took it out, and he took 5 of the poems for his show. And I had done that, David, without knowing where I was going. But I said at the end of it, I feel I can do visual art, not just be a writer, but do visual art. I had heard about Franklin Furnace, and they were giving performances twice a week. I decided to go and start watching performances at Franklin Furnace just to see, if this was something that I really wanted to do. I was just bowled over, not only, of course, did I feel I could do it, I also felt I could do better than what I was looking at. So but I didn't know what the occasion would be or what shape that would take, So I kept going 2 days a week, practically sitting in. She had these like five level bleachers with 5 levels, and I was on the back level so nobody would see me and sneak out before I had to talk to anybody. And I did this for 2 years. I told Martha Wilson that I took my MFA in performance in the back row of Franklin Furnace. There had been an ad for something that looked kind of promising, a show called Afro-American Abstraction at PS1. So I went to this opening, and there must have been about 200 or 300 people, almost all of them Black, almost all of them what I would later come to call, the Black bourgeoisie bohemian crowd, They were so gorgeous and so smart looking and so well turned out, very imaginative clothing, very independently conceived clothing. And I said, okay, these are people I'd like to be around. I had been sort of thinking about the Black art that I had seen at the show, and I had realized that while I had loved the Black artists that I saw, I hadn't quite loved the Black art that I saw. It seemed very tame to me, okay? I had this vision, and it was myself covered in gloves. And I said, oh my God. Because it was like a daydream, like a dream, but during the day. And I said, oh my God, that's what that art was. It was art with white gloves on. So, but within a week or 2, I had sort of figured out what I was going to do. Then I had to find the gloves, and I had to shop Manhattan from the Battery to 125th Street because people were no longer wearing gloves, right? So they were all the gloves were in bins in the back rooms of these thrift stores. I was going east, west, and north, south, and that's all I found. 300 pairs, and I
love the idea that it's also a portrait of Manhattan in a way.
Yes, exactly. It really is. It was wonderful because, and trust me, the further north you got, the better the gloves were.
I love hearing that you're sort of the connective tissue to becoming a performance artist was actually first through writing and reading and writing a script, which is. That was the origin point. But I wanted to hear a little bit more about how that script came about, how you got rid of the script, and then how that turned into, or maybe I'm getting the timeline wrong, how Mademoiselle Bourgeoise Noire came out of that.
The thing, David, that really gave me permission to know that it would be an area where I could excel, I could do what I wanted, would have the freedom to do what I wanted, basically was that it had no history. Mm-hmm. I was not, painters, I feel sorry for them. They're faced with the 3,000 or 4,000 year history or 25,000 year history if you go back to the, the original painting. So that's a big burden to carry on your back, You have to know it. You have to know how you want to differ from it. You have to do all of these things, But I could I felt that this was perfect for me because I felt that my subject matter was never going to be quite like anybody else's subject matter because I was not quite like anybody else because I hadn't at that point met that many people who'd been shaped the way I had, you understand, in this sort of Black bourgeois bohemian fashion.
Can you tell me a little bit about the first action, the actual first action with Mademoiselle Bourgeoise Noire?
Yeah, well, I basically didn't deviate from the script too much, first of all, because I couldn't afford too many props, you know, I couldn't afford to reinvent the wheel all the time. So I had this thing where I went and I said, you know, everything you're doing, everything you're carrying with you has to have a reason. And the gloves, which I felt symbolized the artists in the Afro-American abstraction show, they also symbolized me, you know, and they are a sign, you know. I guess the world is more familiar today with the term respectability politics, but in those days, respectability wasn't just politics, it was life, you understand? And it was a way, especially for women of all races, but particularly for Black women, to internalize the oppression. It was a repression is taking the oppression back in, you know, inside. So the gloves were a sign of internal oppression or repression, internalized, and the whip was a sign of actual reality out there constantly oppressing you. Okay, mm-hmm. So it was, you know, the whip that made plantations move, but it was a metaphor for everything that makes you know, the continuous situation that we have to deal with here, right? So it was a heavy outfit, and I felt I go out and I wear this gown and a cape made of 180 pairs of white gloves, and I'm beating myself with a whip, and then I get accused of glorifying the middle class. That's what that was their response to it. And that's because the whole situation of class has been so excised from the American imagination, not reality, but their imagination of reality. Okay, and so that there was a situation where I would say that the most of the Black folks at just above Midtown did not know what I was doing. They didn't understand that I was critiquing this class, but also somehow admitting complicity with it, you know?
I wonder if you could quickly describe on June 5th, 1980, when you arrived at just above Midtown, what that was like to show up at this opening.
Wow. I didn't know what I was going to get when I got there. Okay. And I'd been staying home to make this costume, okay? So I hadn't actually been going down there the days before the opening, so I didn't know exactly what it was going to look like. And so the first thing I got and I saw was that the entire entrance had been kind of obscured, masked off, because there was, in fact, a tunnel. Somebody had built a tunnel. Okay. And this, who built this tunnel? Only one person could have built this tunnel, David Hammonds. And he had lined this tunnel with stinking smoked fish of various kinds. So here I am in this gorgeous white costume, and I'm going to have to somehow make my way through like this, you know, this so as not to get the stinking herrings all over myself. And we got into the space, and I did my number of giving away my flowers, which is how I start this performance. And I give away all the flowers, and then the flowers are gone, and then there's nothing but the bare whip. And I said, "Okay, Eddie, you take my cape." And he took my cape. And I said, "You take my cape because I'm going to start beating myself." And he said, "Oh, it's going to be that kind of evening." he had no preparation for what was going to happen or what it was about. Nothing, you know. I just said, "Appear with a tux and take me this place," right? But I have to tell you that the person, of course, that I had always considered the smartest, and who, even though I was like, I don't know, 15 years older than she was my role model, and that was Linda Goodbryant, the founder director, right, you know. And after the performance was over, and I was like this, you know, after the performance was over, she was right in front of me when I was performing, And after it was over, I still didn't have my cape back on. I was just standing there, you know, and she rushed up to me and she put her arms around me and she said, that was one of the best things I've ever seen, right? So that is all I can tell you.
That's amazing. No,
Isn't that amazing? And then 3 weeks later, I got a call from the gallery. She said, would you be willing to represent the gallery doing an original performance? You believe that?
After your first performance.
And it just so happened that the day she called, I had been in a thrift store. I always stop by the bookshelves, you know, and when I'm in a thrift store, no matter whether I'm buying clothes or not. And I had found a book, and the book was a book about Nefertiti. And I had come back with this caftan and with this book. And that afternoon, she had called me. And so she said, well, what do you think you might do? And I said, well, I don't know, but I think I'm going to do a piece called Nefertiti Devonia Evangeline.
You just have these moments of inspiration. It really just...
Yeah, no, I do. Just they click very, very fast. Basically, almost everything that I'm well known for, I did in about 3 years, in that first 3 years, right?
Yeah, I kind of want to talk about art is. I'm actually curious about.
Yeah, oh, how that happened. Well, art is something that wasn't quite so much an inspiration, but an act of desperation, if you know what I mean. I had been very disappointed in the response to Mademoiselle Berson's art in general. And so my next step had been to use Mademoiselle Berson's art, her mind, her attitude, as a way of doing other things. I decided to do a parade piece. Now that's just because everybody in my extended family went to every single parade that there was in Boston, right? You know, there was never a parade that we didn't go to, because just that's what people did. My mother loved parades, and so I went to all the little parades with her, you know, and I loved the parades. So I said, I better go to Harlem, where, you know, the parade is very traditional. It's one of those oompa oompa marching band parades, you know. It's not, you know, it's not carnival with, you know, calypso and everybody dancing in the streets. So I applied to get into that parade. They were very reluctant. They didn't like the idea. I had gone into this thing with such trepidation. I'm telling you, I don't think I've ever been so scared of anything, because this was an idea that might work and it might not work. Supposing I took all of this out there, you know, this 9 by 15 foot empty frame, and then these, you know, little girls going around with, you know, frames trying to get people's attention.
So this was the summer of 1983. Where did you get the gold frames? How did that?
Well, no, I just bought unpainted gold frames, and George Mingo, who was helping me make the stuff, he just spray painted them gold.
How many people were there with you?
I had 15 people who I had hired, dancers and so forth, that they were mainly dancers, but a lot of them were actors too. So actors and dancers. And I had never met any of them, just on the day of the parade. It was kind of like, it was hot, and everybody was just really roasting and uncomfortable. But there was so much going on in other ways that everybody was having a good time. And so,
what was the crowd like? What did the crowd think of it?
So when we got when we got past the reviewing stand, I really must say, people really started really getting into it. They could see, I think it was a combination. They could see that the small frames had something to do with the big frame. I don't know. The big frame was pretty imposing. At a certain point, you know, I started hearing phrases like, "That's right, that's right. That's what art is," because I had "art is" on the side of the float. That was the only instructions I was able to give anybody. It was this "art is" on the side of the float. And they said, "That's right, that's what art is. We're the art." And I was just like, and then I started watching, and it was incredible. I was watching people posing. I was watching people taking the photos. I was watching, you know, it just exploded as an experience. But it was still one of those experiences that I couldn't understand. Do you understand? Because it was so big. And so it really wasn't until what, 30 years later or so, when I made the installation, that I understood the experience. I was able to sort of sit with all of the, stuff and understand the experience.
It takes a while. I mean, sometimes, these things, especially these really brilliant ideas that, that have lasting qualities, it takes a long time for you to digest them, to understand them, for them to be received. This is something actually you talk about is that one of the things you anticipate in your performances is an audience to come. You're also, the audience isn't necessarily there yet, but you're trying to create that audience.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have a lot of work, but the work you have is all incredible. I mean, it's just,
Yeah. Well, listen, David, I didn't have time for anything but masterpieces.
That's the way to work. Oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, basically, I had to put everything into whatever opportunity I had, or whatever idea I had.
But I want to get us to announcement of a new persona, performances to come, which is the new persona that you're debuting with your show, Both And.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could tell me a little bit
I
about.
love that you like that piece. I love that you like that piece, even though it hasn't done anything. It's just, sitting on the wall. It's just by itself at the moment. I am going to do a performance. I am going to do many performances, God willing, if, inshallah, if life keeps going.
We've been into New Persona by Lorraine O'Grady. It's a huge.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. This is what people say, this is a historic moment to have you performing again, yeah, I'm really thrilled that it took a long time, not for the idea to gestate, but for the damn costume to gestate, to get together, right? It took forever to get it made. It took forever to learn how to wear it, and how to use it, and so forth. Finally able to perform in it, that's all I can say.
I mean, this is a full suit of armor you're wearing, which is.
Yeah, that's the costume I'm referring to. It's armor, but it's a costume. I feel that for the night, that the armor was the equivalent for the night of the wedding gown for the woman.
Oh, wow, interesting.
That it has all of these possibilities that never can be lived up to. The reason for mentioning that that metaphor, that the armor was the male equivalent of the wedding gown, was that I told him I want this steel to be as white as possible. So that meant that a certain kind of steel had to be purchased. The carbon level had to be at a certain level, and then the process, and then the firing and everything else had to be done in a certain way for it to be white armor, and so that's a whole other reason why it's I've kept it very carefully wrapped so it's not to be too affected by humidity and all the rest of it, but it's a special piece of armor.
You speak about this really beautifully in the March issue, and
Oh yes, I enjoyed writing that piece because it allowed me to sort of put all of it in one place. I've been saying a little bit here in that interview, or that something in another interview, and I had a little art statement that I'd given to the people at the museum, but none of it had the completeness of the statement that I was able to write. Thank you for giving me 1,000 words.
For doing it. I'm really happy. I of course am very excited for people to read it.
Yeah.
You are, one of my favorite artists, also one of my favorite writers.
I'm so happy that you like my writing as well as my artwork, because I think that the two go together and support each other somehow, and so everything is, in this case, coming together: the exhibition and the book, which has already come out with Duke. It's called Writing in Space, which is what I think I do.
Yeah, Writing in Space, also edited by Runa D'Souza, who's
a co-curator of the show. Yeah.
It is a total treasure. The book is, I'm surprised we haven't had this before, actually. I can't, now having actually seen it all together, I'm like, this is a missing piece of the puzzle. I can't believe that we've had to wait this long for this.
Yeah.
I do also wonder, I mean, you had hinted about.
Have you seen the show? Have you been over to the museum or not?
No, I
No,
didn't do it.
I missed my chance to see the show today. Today was the day I was supposed to go and do some final and help them with some final installation issues, and I just couldn't do it. I said this Artforum interview is more important.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really glad you would do it.